let's talk about choosing a sweater size. Sometimes we get so busy worrying about our gauge and our yarn and the fabric we're making that we forget there is one other very important thing we have to consider, and that is which size do we choose in the first place? Sweater sizing can be a little bit tricky, so let me give you a couple of tips to make it easier. First things first, make sure you know your own measurements. Sometimes as we're getting ready to pick a pattern size, that can get a little bit murky and we may choose the wrong size in the beginning, which throws everything else off. And even if our gauge is right, if our size is wrong, it's still not going to fit. And we don't want that, right? So know your own measurements. Which measurements do you need? Take a look at the schematic or finished measurements of the pattern. Now remember, a pattern is going to give you two sets of information. It's going to tell you the sizes, and then it's going to tell you finished measurements. And those two things are generally quite different. The sizes, think of shopping, the size is like a medium or a large or an extra large. The finished measurement is what those measurements actually are. Some patterns will list sizes as 1, 2, 3, 4. Some will list sizes as size 30, 32, 34, 36. But that doesn't mean the finished measurement is 30, 32, 34, 36. You'll have to look at the finished measurements in the pattern, generally located on a schematic or an illustration of that pattern. And those finished measurements are what the actual size of the sweater will be at the end. And the difference between the size and the finished measurement is called ease. Ease is that wiggle room or lack thereof that we build into a pattern in order to make sure that it fits you with a little bit of room. Oftentimes we're wearing sweaters over other clothes, and because of that, we maybe don't want the sweater to fit really snug. And some sweater styles are meant to be worn loosely. So when you're trying to figure out your size, know your own measurements. And I'm not talking about your bra size. Bra size is not the same as your measurement. So make sure you get out a measuring tape and actually measure around the fullest part of your bust. Measure around the widest part of your arms. You're going to need those measurements to decide if you are knitting the best size for you. And then take your measurements and compare them to the finished measurements in the pattern. So let's say your arm circumference is 13 inches. What arm circumference do you have in the pattern for the size you want to make? Maybe it's 15 inches is the finished arm circumference, which means there's going to be 2 inches of extra room in the sleeve for you. What is your bust measurement as compared to what is the finished bust measurement of the sweater? And it might be bust, it might be chest. Either way, if your measurement is 42 inches and the size you want to make, the finished measurement is 42 inches, that means there's 0 ease, no difference between your size and the finished size of the sweater, so it's going to fit a little more snug. That can work when you're a little bit smaller in the shoulders and small in the belly and small in the arms, but fuller in the bust. Sometimes knitting right on that size can work. But for most of us, we do like a little bit more room. So if your size, your measurement around your bust or chest is 42, you might want to knit the size that has a finished measurement of 44 or 45. That gives you 2 to 3 extra inches of room or ease in order to make sure it's a comfortable, loose fit. You also have to keep in mind that some styles are meant to be worn with a lot of wiggle room and some styles are not. So it's really important to keep that in mind as you're choosing your size. Oftentimes a pattern will give you some tips and it will tell you what the fit is meant to be. And you can also see that information if you compare the size with the finished measurement when the sizes are listed as numbers such as 30, 32, 34. If those are the sizes, but the finished measurements are 32, 34, 36, size 30 has a finished measurement of 32. That means there's 2 inches of ease already built in. So you've got to make sure you know that difference. You've got to know what your measurements are. And when you add all those numbers into the factoring for which size you should make, it helps you make a more informed decision in getting the size that you need. Now, obviously, everything about size is still going to come down to making sure you get gauge. If your gauge is off, then the size is going to be off as well. But this is a really good place to start in choosing your sweater size. So get your own measurements, take a good look at the finished measurements in the pattern, and make sure the difference between your measurements and the finished measurements in the pattern give you the amount of ease you want for a comfortable fit.